What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Jeremy Versillo, bringing you a solo show tonight. It's almost Hockey Christmas, as today is Trade Deadline Eve, so let's quickly dive into the trades that have happened since Ryan's show on Tuesday. Note, I'm recording this around 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, March 5th, so if any trades happen after that, they won't be covered until the Sunday mega show with Elon and Brian. The biggest trade that happened is MacKenzie Weegar being traded from Calgary to Utah. Weegar is a highly valuable fantasy defenseman who covers all categories, although his points production has been way down this year. I'm crossing my fingers that he'll bounce back with a better team in front of him. Unfortunately, fantasy managers will have to wait a bit before slotting him into their lineup, as he will be out for the next 4 to 10 days for visa purposes. Fortunately, that means he'll be back in time for the fantasy playoffs, though. One of the interesting questions is if Weegar will get power play time in Utah. Utah already has Mikhail Sergachev and Sean Durzi, so they don't need him on the power play, although their power play is 26th in the league and has not been very good. I'm honestly wondering if they shade more towards a 50-50 split, as their quote-unquote second unit already has Cooley and Peterka on it. We'll have to see how they line up once Weegar gets back in the lineup next week, but definitely keep your eye on that for whether or not Sean Durzi's value gets totally tanked if Weegar takes his spot. None of the other trades are fantasy relevant except for in deeper leagues, but I'll run through them anyway, kind of rapid-fire style. Edmonton acquired Jason Dickinson and Colton Dach from Chicago. Both of them should slide into the bottom 6. Maybe Dach gets enough hits to be relevant in banger leagues, but I doubt either of them will rotate onto McDavid or Draisaitl's wing. Going back to Chicago in that deal was Andrew Mangiapane, who's had a rough year. Again, I don't think he'll suddenly show up on Bedard or Nazar's wing, so he's a bottom 6er in Chicago, which is not particularly fantasy relevant. Vegas acquired Nick Dowd from Washington for picks and a goalie prospect. He'll likely take the third-line center spot, allowing Hurdle to slide back into 2C and Marner to move back to the wing. Braden Bowman or Riley Smith are probably booted from the top 6 here. I don't think Dowd himself is relevant, but it could be a nice boost for Vegas's fantasy-owned guys, because their top 9 is currently spread really thinly. Colorado got Nick Blankenberg from Nashville for a pick. Blankenberg should give some depth down the right side and injury insurance for a playoff run. I'm not sure he slots in every day right now, given the other defensemen Colorado has. What's interesting here is Ryan Ufko earned a call-up to replace him on the roster. Ufko is a 22-year-old defenseman with 44 points in 50 games for AHL Milwaukee. He has power play QB type pedigree and could start establishing himself as Roman Jossi's eventual replacement. I'm hoping Ufko is there to play and not be a 7th defenseman this time. Colorado also acquired Nick Waugh, who will be a bottom 6 center. Cole Smith was traded to Vegas and Michael McCarron to Minnesota, both from Nashville. Warren Foegele was traded to Ottawa. Dallas acquired Tyler Myers and Michael Bunting. Jeff Petry was traded to Minnesota for a conditional pick, and Olli Maatta was part of the return Calgary got in the Weegar deal. I'll eat my hat if any of those guys are fantasy relevant down the stretch, though. There's also a few rumors swirling where guys are being held out of the lineup for today's game to be aware of. I won't waste time speculating on destinations and potential fantasy impact, but the Rangers have held out Vincent Trocheck and Sam Carrick, Winnipeg, Logan Stanley and Luke Schenn, Toronto, Bobby McMann, Scott Laughton, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Panthers held out AJ Greer, and have been rumored to be shopping Bobrovsky, who's backing up tonight. The Blues are holding out Colton Parayko, who apparently already vetoed a trade to Buffalo. I think the only relevant thing I'll speculate on here is Daniil Tarasov could be worth a speculative add, as if Bobrovsky gets traded, Tarasov is the starter for a Florida team that is better than their record because they've been getting guys back from the injured list. Now that we've got all the trade news out of the way, let's take a look at some injury and outjury news. There's nothing major on the injury front. Mikhail Sergachev is day-to-day, so it's going to be tough to figure out Utah's defense with both him and Weegar out. Mikael Granlund and Mark Stone got put on IR, but I think that's just a paper transaction for flexibility. Granlund has already missed a full week, and Stone is, I think, at about 4 or 5 days right now, so they both could come back anytime pretty much. On the outjury front, Roope Hintz practiced today and is expected to be back in the lineup tomorrow. The lines are slightly different than what we saw out of Dallas before the break, with Robertson, Hintz, and Johnston as the top unit, and Steele, Duchesne, and Ben sticking together as the second unit. This makes Maverick Bourque the big loser if these lines are what they go with Friday and Sunday, so keep that in mind if you streamed him this week. Additionally, the LA Kings are poised to get Darcy Kuemper and Drew Doughty back tonight, and in Columbus, Boone Jenner will be back after a one-game absence, and Zach Werenski is not quite ready to return from his illness, but I expect he'll be back by Saturday. Last but not least, Frank Vetrano and Ryan Strome returned for Anaheim last night. Vetrano did have an empty net goal, but I don't think either of them are worth rushing out to grab. They'll make okay streamers when they have the classic Anaheim off-night schedule. With all that done, let's go to a quick ad break, and I'll be back with some hot streaks, cold streaks, and snoozers.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player props and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you the options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm taking a look at the odds right now. I like looking at the awards. See the Norris odds there? It's basically Cale Makar and Zach Werenski, both the overwhelming favorites. Quinn Hughes is the next up. Pretty high odds. Quinn Hughes, I think, is pretty good. Maybe he has a shot. But hey, that's up for you to decide over at DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-777777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 plus in most states, void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer. Copyright 2026. NHL. All rights reserved.
Welcome back. We'll start with the happier news, a few hot streaks to get you started. First up, Matt Duchene is back. As I mentioned last week, he was primed for a good run of points with upgraded deployment and extra time to heal from his injury. He's now got 8 points in his last 4 games since the Olympic break. It includes a 4-assist effort Tuesday night. Going back to before the break, his streak is now 17 points in his last 10 games played, and he's doing that with between 13 and 17 minutes a night. Last year, he averaged 17.09. He probably loses a bit of relevance once Rantanen returns, but that doesn't appear to be imminent, so definitely check your leagues and see if you can go out and grab Matt Duchene. My next 2 hot streaks are deep cuts. Alex Newhook is 4% owned in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, and has points in all 3 games since returning from injury / the Olympic break. He actually was out since about November. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists in that 3-game streak, and although there's only 4 shots in power play 2 deployment, I'm not adding Newhook anywhere except for as a streamer, but he's a name worth keeping an eye on if Montreal shuffles their lines or power play units again, and in deeper leagues. The next guy's a bit more interesting to me. Connor Brown is 0% owned in KKUPFL, and seems to be doing his best Stefan Nason impression in New Jersey. Brown also has a 3-game point streak with a goal and 3 assists in that span, and in his last game he also fired 6 shots on goal. Brown is lining up with Jack Hughes at even strength and is on power play 1, and even touched 20 minutes of ice time a couple games ago. He only plays 2 games next week, so temper your expectations in the short term. But if you're looking ahead to playoffs and are kind of in no man's land with a week to prep, he plays Monday, Wednesday, Friday of quarterfinals and has a total of 11 games and 5 off nights during fantasy playoffs. If you're locked into the 3 through 6 seeds, I'd consider looking at him as an ad in the middle of next week before he gets snatched up. Last but not least, I'm going to take a look at some cold players who are widely owned right now and try to help you discern whether or not they're just cold or if they're snoozers you should cut on your championship run. Josh Doan is 100% owned in KKUPFL and only has 1 point since the break and 5 in his last 10. He's still shooting some and getting power play 1 deployment, and playing with Norris and Ostlund at even strength. He also has a point tonight in Buffalo's game, which started about an hour ago. I'm going to call him cold, and I'm fine continuing to hold him as long as the deployment and the shooting continues. I actually quite like Josh Doan as a player, and I'm just looking at Buffalo being such a strong team right now and being on that top power play are all reasons I would want to have Josh Doan on my roster. Anthony Cirelli is 94% owned in KKUPFL and doesn't have a point in 2 games since returning from injury. I understand the desire to hold on for another game or two, but with Brayden Point healthy and firing on all cylinders, I think Cirelli is cuttable in most formats. Tampa likes to use Cirelli in a more defensive role, and there's even a chance they trade for someone to take his offensive minutes. Most of his fantasy production came with Brayden Point either injured or slumping badly, and now that Point seems to be back to his old self, I don't think there's much room for Cirelli to chip in on the offense. He'll be a good streamer, but not the type of guy that I want to sit on my roster for multiple weeks hoping he'll get a couple points. Eeli Tolvanen in Seattle is 78% owned in KKUPFL, but only has 1 point in his last 10 games. He does average around 2 shots and 2 hits per game, and only has 1 goal on his last 21 shots for a sub 5% shooting percentage. The ice time and deployment is up there too, still. He's playing with Stevenson and Schwartz at even strength, and on power play too. So I'm okay continuing to hold Tolvanen. I think the shots and the hits give you enough of a peripheral floor, and the points will come. I mean, he's still getting plenty of minutes of ice time, 17, 18 minutes a night. He's playing with Seattle's better players and on one of their power play units. He's going to turn it around, and although the Kraken have the worst fantasy playoff schedule with 3 weeks of Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I'm okay having Tolvanen in my roster for next week and the following week, and then we'll judge from there. Emil Heineman on the New York Islanders is 76% owned, but only has 1 point in his last 10 games and 2 in his last 20. The shots are trending down also, only 5 in his last 6 games combined. He did have some 4, 5, and 6 shot games before the break, and he does hit quite a bit, and he's on power play too. But I'm a bit worried about the so-called rookie wall. Even though he is no longer a rookie, I am worried that Heineman just is not going to be able to bounce back to how he was at the beginning of the season, and I think he's a fine choice to cut for the 76% of leagues that he is owned in KKUPFL. Jake Neighbors is 49% owned and has no points in 4 games since the break. He's still getting power play 1 time and is hitting a bit more, just not shooting a ton. I'm okay letting him go. I think he's just a streamer level guy. I think I'd rather Holloway or Snuggerud or Thomas or Kyrou, obviously, on St. Louis's offense. And there's just not a lot of offense to go around in St. Louis. So yeah, Jake Neighbors, you can send him to the wire if you're in that 49%. I'm okay getting rid of him. This next guy may be the biggest snoozer of them all, though. Alexander Nikishin is somehow 78% owned in KKUPFL and is absolutely doing nothing and has been for a while. He's down to 15 to 16 minutes a night as a defenseman, which isn't great, and he hasn't had a point in 6 games and only 2 in his last 10. He's also barely shooting, hitting, or blocking anymore. I think this is another victim of the rookie wall, and there are definitely better D options you can find on the wire, or just kick him out for someone who's going to play 4 games all 4 weeks of playoffs, or all 3 weeks of playoffs. I don't know why I said 4 again. But yeah, I have no interest in having Alexander Nikishin on my non-dynasty rosters at this point. Carolina is getting into playoff mode. Slavin's back. Gostisbehere's back. They're limiting his minutes, and I don't think he's going to be a help to your fantasy team for the rest of the year. Lastly, one more guy that it appears most people noticed because he's only 29% owned in KKUPFL. But if you're one of the managers holding Dmitry Voronkov, you're definitely snoozing. He's on the 4th line and power play 2. He's been averaging less than 10 minutes a game since the coaching change. Cut. I don't think there's any coming back from this. Seems like, I don't even know if he's in the doghouse because I don't think he's done anything wrong to end up there. But clearly he's being deployed as a checking line forward, not an offensive threat like he was under the previous coach. That's all I've got time for tonight. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, please consider joining the Keeping Karlsson Patreon group at www.keepingkarlsson.com/patron. Super supporters receive ad-free episodes, and you can join our Discord server to interact with Brian, Elon, myself, the rest of the Short Shifts crew, and hundreds of other talented fantasy managers. Check out www.gamedaytweets.com to get all the best info from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of Twitter. It includes team by team and searchable tweets by player name and starting goalie confirmations. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episode with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.